So first I want to talk about Vinegar Syndrome has a release of the 1988 classic Hell Comes to Frogtown. So it's coming out in late August, and it stars, of course, Roddy Piper. So the trailer is so ridiculous that I figured I would just play the audio from the trailer. It just had been a number of years since I'd seen this film, and I forgot how preposterous the narration is to the trailer. So let's just give a listen to that.
Reflect for a moment on the art of cinema. Think of a motion picture like The Last Emperor and the 9 Academy Awards it so richly deserved. Consider the profound emotional experience of a truly great film. Then forget it, sweetheart.
Yes, better blow it out your exhaust pipe, cinema lover, because here comes fun with hair on it.
Oh, that's disgusting.
You're gonna see the biggest piece of shattering entertainment that ever molested your sensibilities.
That sounds great.
Want a plot? Here it is. It's the end of the 20th century, and mankind has blown its wad. The fate of humanity rests in the groin of one man.
Their leader, Commander Toady, has kidnapped some pilgrims who wandered into their territory. We're gonna get him out, and then you're gonna get him pregnant.
Yes, if you want a brilliant film, you can go right to...
We're going to Frogtown.
Hell Comes to Frogtown. Starring wrestling superstar Roddy Piper. Move over, Mr. Mel Gibson and Mr. Robert De Niro. Here comes acting talent and sensitivity like you've never seen.
You are one weird dude.
And speaking of talent, turn green, Ms. Meryl Streep. Here's Sandal Bergman, the exquisite star of Red Sonja and Conan the Barbarian. Hell Comes to Frogtown, a story of mutant sex and people like you and me. It's hot, it's wet,
and it's bad.
It's Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Vinegar Syndrome is doing a release of Hell Comes to Frogtown, and what they do is these really high-end releases. Sometimes they'll retransfer the film from the negative, so for most people, they're seeing it in a way that you've never seen it before, unless you saw it in the theater, first run with a perfect, print. So Vinegar Syndrome is actually featured in, VHS Massacre 2 just in passing. We had wanted to get some footage from the actual store, but it just didn't work out. But as Sean Phillips, who I interviewed, said once, that every now and then you'll see some of these releases in a Best Buy and things like that, and actually gives you some hope for the future of physical media releases. Now, one of the things that had happened over this past week is that I did an investigation into why one of the films that I had purchased through Amazon Prime, I'd bought it not as a rental, but buying it. You hit the buy tab, and it had been deleted. So I bought my own film. I bought this film, London Betty, and I just wanted it permanent. I wanted to be able to bring it up. Not that I watch it that much, but it's just you want to have your own digital library of your own stuff. So that was a film that was sold to Maverick Entertainment in 2010 and came out, and it was all the blockbusters. So I directed that one. It was a big deal at the time for me. So Maverick Entertainment eventually put it on Amazon Prime for streaming. Well, last year, thousands of independent films were yanked off of Amazon Prime with no explanation, some vague explanation of wanting some kind of quality standards, but nothing specific. And there was it was sort of not irrational, but there's no specific reason that made sense, because the stuff they pulled Some of it was high quality, some of it was low quality, some of it was non-violent, some of it had violence, so it was just a total mishmash. So the problem is that people who actually bought these films, not rented them or saw them through Prime, they had their libraries deleted, and I was one of those people. So I reached out to Amazon and had to go through this messenger site, and at one point they said, sorry, the distributor pulled the title, and I called them out and I said, no, that is a lie. I know for a fact because I know the distributors and I've talked to distributors, and they did not delete the title. You deleted the title. So this is a thing that they're doing now, where their representatives are actually lying about why they're trying to push it back onto the distributor, as if the distributor wanted to just delete, their catalog and stop making the few nickels they might get off of that. So this goes to show you that you really don't have control over your media library. And it's one of the strongest cases for actually buying physical media and keeping physical media. There's 4K Blu-ray, and there's, regular Blu-ray is great quality as well. Here's a thing that is true. I was watching Mandy on Shudder. I subscribe to Shudder. I like Shudder. The stream was fucking garbage. You could see these big blocks in the compression, and you can debate, was it the stream my internet? I live in New York City. I pay a lot of money for, high-speed internet. And this is a serious problem, too, is that some of these, they're claiming Ultra HD and HD. None of it's really true. The compression is so bad and the color space is so bad. It's like, what are you really getting? So there's a case to be made for, if you want a consistent product, buy physical media. If you want permanent access to that title, buy physical media. Because the only other alternative is, as these major movie companies, who, there's like 5 media companies now, they're all squabbling all over their content. So they're pulling back their content to each of their camps. You never get the films that you want on your streaming sites. You're always picking something, some second or third best thing that you want to see. And so the argument here is the only alternative is to either steal it through torrenting, which is, according to Professor James Richardson, on the uprise now. Or you can do the legal thing, which is what I do, and I buy the films themselves. And the reason why I do that is because I'm an independent filmmaker, and I don't want the business to die. So that's what I would recommend. If you really like a film or you're really interested in a film, buy it. So I'm going to go and I'm going to buy the Blu-ray of Mandy. I already have Beyond the Black Rainbow, which is pretty awesome. So anyway, this is just developing stuff as it happens with Amazon. But you cannot trust these media conglomerates because they don't operate with any moral procedure. It's all capitalism. So they have no problem with deleting your content. And buried within the terms, I'm sure it says that the terms of use that they can do this legally. So that's, there's a big joke that no one reads the terms of use because they're like 10 pages long and it's legal jargon, but it basically says that they can do whatever they want. And, you were never really buying the film. You were basically, at best, buying a license to the film that there's the appearance that it's permanent, and it's just not. It's not. So that's a bummer. So, but anyway, check out Hell Comes to Frogtown. Buy the Blu-ray Vinegar Syndrome. It's cool. Their packages always come with the Blu-ray and the standard DVD version, which is kind of awesome. So I wanted to talk about Rutger Hauer. Rutger Hauer, he really was one of my heroes growing up. When I grew up in my brothers are now very successful. One brother owns a application company. Another brother owns, he's a project manager or an engineer. So they're all super successful. But we started off in the video store industry. Dan, my oldest brother Dan, worked at a video store, and then my brother Bruce opened his own franchise. So, I was little. I was the youngest brother, so my brother Dan would bring home these movies. And at the time, these were very expensive movies, so you couldn't bring home, A-list movies, right? So he wasn't bringing home like E.T. He was bringing home like Blind Fury with Rutger Hauer. You know, he wasn't bringing home, Back to the Future. He was bringing home Best of the Best, with Eric Roberts. So what happens is, this was very formative in the way that I grew up, where I grew up watching, I think, initially more B movies than A movies, and I really grew to appreciate them. And I remember working in Blockbuster Video at some point, because at some point I just, done the fast food thing and the paper route and managed to get a job in Blockbuster. And at that time, very happy to not be covered in grease and things. And I remember there's this, they were selling Blade Runner and the VHS version. And I was just very drawn to it. And I started watching it, and I actually didn't like it the first time I watched it. But there was something about it that I couldn't put out of my head. And so I remember, this is basically being a teenager, putting it in, and sometimes falling asleep to it, sometimes watching it over and over again. And I didn't fully understand why I liked it and why I thought it was important until I went to college, and they started talking about how Ridley Scott pushed the envelope for sci-fi further than most modern directors. And he really understood the fourth dimension, if you want to call that time, or you can call it space-time or whatever, but the fact that film is a two-dimensional format except for time. And when Ridley Scott would use light, he would use moving light moving through space. And so it's a weird way, we're not talking like space-time, like astronomy, but we are talking about light moving over time through space. And if you think of those big lights that shine down through there's the hotel scene, and they're sweeping back and forth. And what it did is it kind of opened my mind to different techniques using gels and, creating atmosphere through lighting and texture. Texture is a huge thing. Ridley Scott must have been influenced by Tarkovsky. That's a whole different subject. But, and then within that film, too, you have this main character, Harrison Ford, he's sort of soulless, he's kind of dead inside, and he's tasked to do the worst job. And then you have this villain, Roy Batty, who is essentially a 4-year-old robot with all these memories gifted to him. And so emotionally, he's not that mature, and he exudes all these things that shouldn't be there, as a sense of soul in him, a sense of humor, a sense of being embarrassed. What you find is this replicant is more human than more human than human, is a line from the actual film. Tyrell said that. So you have this really profound performance. You have this tremendous buildup of atmosphere, and this grizzled cop chasing down these people that he's outmatched for, clearly. And this film is long and it's beautiful. And the crescendo is when Roy Batty, who's a superior villain, has the opportunity to kill Harrison Ford as he's falling off a building, and he saves him. And as he's dying, he gives this beautiful speech. This speech resonates because it's a very human thing, time that you're a human being on this planet, and the limitation of this earthly plane. And it's him talking a bit about his experiences, gives this beautiful poetry at the end, which is, I think, one of the most profound things. This thing that is supposed to be a robot, essentially having this sense of poetry, which, if you think art can be at its best some of the best things that we do as humans, you could say engineering as well, building, but art really to some degree separates us from other creatures on the planet. And so, last speech of a dying robot is somehow really gets to the heart of us, and maybe there's something in that we think is true about us, these limited creatures, and we think, and the fear comes about when we think maybe we are limited like that, like our soul is not eternal, you know. And there's something so deeply existential about the whole thing. You can lose yourself in it, and you can think about things. And the film, much like a Tarkovsky film, gives you the time to do that. Scenes are laid out and they move slow, and there's rain and fog and texture, constantly moving imagery that all amounts to something. It's this beautiful blend of art and commerce, honestly, because it's a studio film. So it's a real rarity, because the studio system is just a business, and it is soulless in its own right. And when a film transcends that to become profound, it is so rare and wonderful. So why don't let's listen to Rutger Hauer's Tears in the Rain speech.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-Hauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
Done a man's job, sir.
What can you say about that, except it's Roy Batty is maybe the best villain in modern cinema. Anyway, okay, so another monologue by Rutger Hauer. But this is what I wanted to say. So growing up watching these B movies, the thing is, when Rutger Hauer would pop up in a movie, in a large Hollywood film, later in his career, you always got the feeling that director got it, and they understood the value of Rutger Hauer and who he was. So Rutger Hauer was in Batman Begins and Dark Knight. One of his most famous line is, "Didn't you get the memo?" when Christian Bale, Batman, was ousted from the corporation, Wayne Industries. But the thing is, he only had a few lines. He is there, I believe, by Christopher Nolan. If you look at Dark Knight and the impeccable quality of it, there is a parallel to Blade Runner, where he is trying to create the most realistic environment he can possibly create. And so Rutger Hauer almost ends up being an Easter egg or evidence for Christopher Nolan's influences. And it happens in Sin City, too. So Rutger Hauer is Bishop Rourke in Sin City, and he pops up, and it's another really cool monologue. about this corrupt bishop that resorts to cannibalism. Fascinating. Sin City really is pretty amazing for what it is. So let's listen to that.
When he came to me, he was a tormented boy. Tormented by guilt. I tried to counsel him. But the eating, it filled him with white light. Tearful, he swore to me that he felt the touch of God Almighty. What the hell do you know? I know it's pretty damn weird to eat people. He didn't just eat their bodies. He ate their souls. And I joined in. They were all whores. Nobody cared for them. Nobody missed them. And then your Goldie almost ruined everything. She stayed in public places. And then with you. You were so convenient. You broke a man's jaw that very night. Who would believe a thug like you? Kevin killed her. I ordered the police in for you, but you wouldn't be caught. You wouldn't stop. And now he's dead and you're here to eliminate me. Will that give you satisfaction, my son? Killing a helpless, old fart. The killing, no satisfaction. Everything up into the killing. Be a gas. Kevin. We're going home. You can scream now if you want to.
So, Hobo with a Shotgun, it's this Canadian first-time director, Jason Eisner, and, he's this Canadian director, and he had directed this, it was a trailer contest, I believe. He directed a Hobo with a Shotgun trailer. Very effective, very well done, exploitation type of, trailer. Looks like a 70s or 80s film. He managed to make a feature film within Canada, and you have to hand it to the Canadians that they actually do give a shit about their independent filmmakers. And for many years, Joe Bob Briggs will tell you they were bankrolling, absolutely bankrolling many independent filmmakers. I think the film Wolf Cop was bankrolled by the Canadian government. So you have a situation where oddly, a lot of great exploitation films are coming out of Canada, and less so in the United States because we're such a financial-based system, in our film industry, that just things get watered down and ruined, and you end up with something like Sharknado, which really doesn't have any, pardon the pun, but doesn't really have any teeth. It's sort of this watered-down, made-for-TV piece of shit that it just doesn't really it's not real exploitation. So oddly, Canada seems to be doing it right in that regard. Jason Eisner directed this film, and I remember hearing a conversation with Rutger Hauer and him saying, to the director, there's not really much here. You haven't really written the main character. It's just very thin. And so Jason replied, well, that's why I need you. That's why I need your help. And Rutger Hauer was like, okay, yeah, he turned it back on me. Okay, should I help this kid? Okay, I'll help this kid. So he decided to give this guy Jason a huge break and be in the film, and I can't think of a better character to play that role. And gave all this weight to such a role. It's a comedic role at its core, but gave this soul to it. Again, he gives this soul, he breathes life into this two-dimensional character and turns it into this wonderful performance.
I used to be like you a long time ago. You're all brand new and perfect. No mistakes, no regrets. People look at you and think of how wonderful your future will be. They want you to be something special, like a doctor or a lawyer. hate to tell you this, but if you grow up here, you're more likely to wind up selling your bodies on the streets. Or shooting dope from dirty needles in a bus stop. And if you're successful, you'll make money selling junk to crackheads. And you won't think twice about killing someone's wife, because you won't even know what's wrong in the first place. Like me, a hobo with a shotgun.
I think that was the key to Rutger Hauer and why he was pretty much my favorite actor. He really, I don't think, was appreciated as much as he should have been, but he did seem to take roles more in genre, although he was excellent in The Hitcher. I recently had a daughter, and so I've been sort of on diaper duty these last 3 weeks, so it's been kind of hard for me to get on the mic and talk about Rutger Hauer, but he was such an important part of my childhood that I think I just needed to do it. So anyway, fare thee well. You've slipped this mortal coil, and I hope you're rocking out in the afterlife. Anyway, so beyond that, I finished a 98-minute cut of VHS Massacre 2. I'm having some of my producers review the cut to sculpt it and fine-tune it and debug it, add some more B-roll and things like that. But I think we're starting to get to a point where we have a cut that is approaching being finished. And that's pretty cool, because I think it's been a couple years I've worked on this. Let's hear a tune from Tib Kulig, and for the new score of VHS Massacre 2, he could play us out. We'll see you next time. I'll try to post a new episode next week, and we'll see how it goes.